our last presenter is, but not least, is Karen Ferguson, who's talk about a very interesting idea modeled in part on the Dutch experience.
And Richard, I'm going to, as the person who lobbied for the podium,
yes,
I'd like to use it.
You should use it.
I don't have the Phil Donahue technique here, so I thought that this might be easier. What you've just heard in these three proposals are very interesting, I think very creative, I think very important measures. They all have one thing in common. They all are, to some degree, backed by an employer, and ultimately, except for Judy's exotic wrinkle at the end, ultimately backed by the PBGC and Josh.
Personally.
What? The proposal that I'm presenting today is very different. Its starting point is that a great many employers have made it perfectly clear that they don't want to be the guarantors of benefits, even to the very modest degree envisioned by these proposals. If they're willing to sponsor a plan at all, it's usually a 401k, which, as everybody knows, puts all the risks and responsibilities on the individuals who can not easily bear them. So our proposal would propose a new voluntary private retirement structure that would take all risks and all responsibilities away from employers for everything except making very modest contributions. The proposal is designed to appeal to employers who feel that retirement security is an important part of the wage package. They care about retirement security. And we think that there are a great many of them. There are small employers, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations, there are unionized employers who are looking for something other than a 401k for their employees, and there are a lot of very large non-union corporations that are very worried right now about having a lot of older employees hanging around because they can't afford to retire, and if they fire them, of course, they'll be subject to age discrimination lawsuits. So we think that there is real interest there. We also think that there is interest, and I hope I'm right, on the part of unions and employees in fair, efficient, and simple plan structures. The proposal that I'm going to be describing is up there. It's called Retirement Security Funds. Very briefly, you can see in the bullets, the three elements are that there would be retirement security funds, which are licensed, single-purpose financial institutions dedicated solely to retirement. The second key element is that these retirement security funds would provide for risk sharing by the employees and the retirees. We almost called it the risk-sharing retirement security funds proposal, but that seemed a bit long. And third, they would incorporate a new kind of benefit formula. We call it a reverse match. You could call it a backwards 401k. Retirement security funds would also provide many of the characteristics of traditional pensions, of pooled professional investment, money locked in until retirement, and lifetime payments to retirees and spouses. Okay, details on the proposal. First, as I said, RSFs, as we call them, would be financial institutions or subsidiaries of financial institutions. Dedicated, as I said, to retirement, they'd be licensed and regulated by the federal government. They'd be administered by professional money managers and advised by an advisory board consisting of employee, retiree, and employer representatives. Almost all insurance companies, mutual funds, banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions would be eligible to compete for RSF licenses. Financial institutions that are awarded RSF licenses would be required to commit to long-term conservative investment practices and to meet capital and other requirements prescribed by the regulating agency. The second major feature of the proposal is that risk sharing among employees and retirees features. Employers would, as I said, assume no risk, no investment risk, no longevity risk, no interest rate risk. And actually, the federal government and even the financial institution would not be assuming the risk. Okay, how would this work? Our proposal borrows from a concept developed in the Netherlands. Some of you are familiar with it. It's called the Collective Defined Contribution Plan. It's actually technically a defined benefit plan, but it's called a CDC. Instead of all the risks being placed on employers, the risks are shared by the employees and the retirees participating in the fund. Okay, what does this mean? It means that in the event of poorer than projected investment returns, as just happened, or other unanticipated events, RSFs could, if they follow specified procedures, reduce benefits for both employees and retirees. Not a happy thought, particularly for a participant advocacy group. But because all of the participants in a plan will be affected, the RSF, the government regulator, the participants, and the employers are likely to make every effort to prevent this from happening. The third special feature is its benefit formula. As I said, RSFs would incorporate what we call the reverse match formula. And what this means is that employees match the contributions of their employers. Any employers choosing to participate in an RSF or required by a collective bargaining agreement to participate in an RSF would contribute a minimum of 3% of pay for each employee. The employees would then be permitted to match their employer contributions on a 2-to-1 basis, 2 employee dollars for every $1 contributed by the employer, up to a maximum of 9% of pay. Employers could, of course, choose to contribute more than the minimum, and that would increase the amounts that could be put in by the employees. And that's actually one of my favorite aspects of the reverse match concept, because the higher paid employees who know the boss can put pressure on him will say, I want to put in more, so you, Mr. Employer, put in more, and that will benefit all the employees who can't afford to contribute, since they will get that minimum or the raised contribution. We've also added a saver's credit concept for those who can afford, lower income people who can afford to contribute. Very simply, how would benefits be calculated? It's always the question. Basically, you add up the contributions, employer-employee contributions, and a limited amount of investment return. We're capping the investment return at a 3% real, that means inflation-adjusted return, and so that the reserve, the excess, hopefully, investment return will go into a reserve fund that will be there for when bad things happen, or if good things happen, the excess, the reserve can be used, again, at the discretion of the RSF, for increases for retirees, cost of living increases, and increased dividends for employees. So very quickly, of course, all payments would be paid out as annuities. Just very quickly, I want to make sure that everybody understands that the Pension Rights Center would much prefer to have employees have guaranteed pensions. We would much prefer to have a universal system, and those of you familiar with our Retirement USA work know that we're working hard for that. But this conference is about reimagining pensions to make retirement more adequate and more secure for today's workers in a voluntary system. And we think that's what retirement security funds would do.